Hi guys, thank you for joining me here. For those of you unaware, my main channel is civilian use only, where I make videos on guns in games. Now, I want to talk a bit about why I wanted to make this second channel. There's a few reasons. First, to prove that my voice isn't AI. But more importantly, much of my time on YouTube has been spent making long-form videos, from Ready or Not to more general firearms and gaming content. I enjoy making these videos, but there's two things consistent about all of them. They're very heavily scripted, and they often go into a lot of history. That's all well and good. I enjoy the process of making these videos and bringing together people who have experience with the real stuff. But as some of you may have noticed, I also go out and shoot, as well as go airsofting fairly regularly. And because of that, I've bought a good amount of gear over the years. And sometimes, I just want to talk about my experiences with the gear, without needing to edit a long-form video. So, that's what the general focus of this channel will be. Today, I wanted to talk about some of the things I brought to my first Milsim. I attended my first one this year. It wasn't a hardcore one like Milsim West, but rather, one that focused on constant gunfights. For this Milsim, I prioritized two things, ammo and water. Unlike some of the other Milsims out there, this one had a lot of shooting involved. So, I went looking for a new chest rig. Since I was bringing in AK, the chest rig I wanted to buy was the Tasmanian Tiger chest rig. But for a rig as old as it is, it's quite expensive.
It's time to stop!
So I went looking for an alternative, and that's when I learned about the Helicon Text Guardian rig. A rig with 3 double-stack mag pouches and 2 additional rifle pouches, 2 large utility pouches, and a whole bunch of molly to add other stuff. It was exactly what I wanted. And the best part, it cost significantly less than the Tasmanian Tiger. There's only one thing I didn't like about the rig. It uses an X harness. I have pretty broad shoulders, so I wanted an H harness instead. But I didn't want to have to buy an expensive aftermarket one. So, I used something no one in the history of the world has ever thought of using. Yeah, I used $1 worth of 550 paracord. It works fine. The rig worked great. The utility pouches fit a canteen-shaped water bottle fine, and the mag pouches can comfortably hold 6 AK mags. The molly let me attach another pouch for my radio, and the whole thing was comfortable to wear for a few days. I should have added a dedicated grenade pouch, but it's very simple to add as many as you need. Overall, it's a great rig for the price. It's not a hypebeast product, and it lacks some features compared to some other large chest rigs. But if you need a scalable rig that can hold 6 mags and water, the Helicon Text Guardian rig is a great choice. Note that Helicon Text has made a new Guardian Recce rig. Personally, I prefer the older one I have, since I prefer the double-stack mag pouches of the old one. So, that's the rig, but what about the gun? I brought an LCT AK-74M. Sort of. It would be an AK-74M, except for the folding triangle stock. Now, why did I buy this hybrid of an AK instead of a 1-to-1 clone? It was cheap, okay? I bought it with cash in a Walmart parking lot. One thing I wanted to do with this AK was spend as little as possible. So, most of the upgrades on the gun are either things I already own or relatively inexpensive parts. Starting from the front, I replaced the stock muzzle device for a Zenico DTK2, mainly for the look. And at night, I switched it out for an Ace-Tech Blaster Tracer unit, the same one that was on my custom ACR I built 2 years ago. The most jank, but my favorite part of this rifle, is the flashlight. This is a Convoy S2 flashlight that I purchased off AliExpress for about $20. And yes, there's no mount whatsoever. I simply used a bunch of duct tape to hold it on. Convoy lights are highly recommended as an EDC light on a budget. They aren't as tough as a Streamlight or Surefire, but for airsoft, it does the job. With 1000 lumens and powered by an 18650 rechargeable battery, it's quite bright. To my eye, it comes pretty close in performance to the Streamlight rifle light that I have. Obviously, the Streamlight is much more robust, but the Convoy is a fraction of the price. What made me choose this light setup was watching Ukrainian combat footage. because there are Ukrainian soldiers who are going into combat with something very similar, an AK with a duct-taped AliExpress flashlight. So if it's good enough for real combat, it's good enough for me. For my optics setup, I had a Holosun 510C with their magnifier. In terms of quality, these are both very good optics, and as an added bonus, the height of each perfectly matches. Since I have astigmatism, most red dots appear to my eye as a starburst instead of a clean dot. While the 510C still doesn't appear as a perfect dot to me, it's a lot better than most other red dots to my eyes. The donut of death certainly helps. And speaking of, the larger circle is pretty useful for airsoft. Just put your target within the donut and eventually, you'll hit it. On the stock, I had two things. This stock pouch serves to make the bare metal of the stock feel nicer when aiming, and the pouch can store small important tools, like a flathead for zero adjustment. And on the back, I have a GP25 recoil pad. AK stocks are generally a bit too short for me, so I like putting on something to extend the length just a bit. Longtime viewers of the main channel will know this, but I actually started out on YouTube doing airsoft teching videos. And while I don't do videos on that anymore, I certainly haven't forgotten how to tech an AEG. Working on the LCT was interesting. This isn't my first LCT AK, but this is one of their newer models. For some reason, many of the screws were Loctited. I stripped both the hop-up screws and had to buy replacements. Internally, I replaced a decent amount. Here's a full breakdown of the internals for all you teching nerds like me. The thing that certainly made the build was the Perrin V3 Hybrid MOSFET and the Perrin Clicker. The Perrin V3 Hybrid is a great MOSFET. This is the third one I've bought. It has a lot of neat features and is relatively inexpensive. And combined with the Perrin Clicker, this gives the AEG trigger an actual wall and break. Though I wasn't able to get it to quite match an AK trigger, it feels a lot better than a typical AEG trigger. And as an added bonus, it's fun to dry fire, since you don't have to reset the trigger every time. So, how did this rifle setup work? Pretty well. LCT AKs are very solidly built, and the attachments I had on made a difference. The Holosun 510C is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated optics on the market. It is an open emitter optic, but that doesn't mean it isn't durable. I was crawling through mud, banging it against trees, and otherwise treating it very poorly, but the optic never failed. In fact, during one of the nights, it rained incredibly hard, and due to the shape of the 510C, water was collecting where the solar panel is, almost like a little bowl. I was having to shake the optic around every few minutes because so much water was collecting in the optic, and yet, the 510C never failed. The magnifier was very helpful as well. Having a bit of magnification was super helpful in spotting people hiding in brush. The only downside is that it's fairly large compared to other magnifiers on the market, but it more than makes up for this with its glass quality and general ruggedness. The convoy light worked pretty well. I don't own night vision, so I was using my light to PID. It was bright enough to see relatively far in the woods. I didn't feel at a disadvantage compared to others with much nicer lights. However, I was at a noticeable disadvantage compared to those who had night vision. No surprise there. It's hard to beat those who can see in the dark without giving away their position. Still, with my light, I didn't feel completely outclassed, just mostly. With the amount of rain that occurred during this event, I was somewhat worried about the electrical internals of the rifle. But though there was a ton of water, the rifle never failed. There was an instant where the selector chip that controls the fire mode of the rifle fell out, which caused the AEG to stop working, but I attribute that more to my crappy glue job than anything else. And using white tape as a temporary fix, I was able to get the gun up and running fast enough. I used an old Magpul MS2 sling I had from years ago, and attached it to the gun via my favorite paracord. I've moved away from using any kind of metal sling point, since I prefer quiet sling mounts. The Magpul sling certainly isn't the fanciest, but it worked for me. Overall, I had a great time, and my gear was more than adequate for the event. There were two main reasons why I bought what I did. One, because I didn't want to spend that much setting up new gear. And more importantly, to show that you don't need to buy the latest and greatest stuff to enjoy airsoft or shooting. A lot of us are critical of the over-consuming nature of hypebeast fashion, justifiably so, but for some reason, guns and gear are exempt from this criticism of overconsumption. Just because the Funny Sea Mammal Group releases a new mount does not mean you need to go out and buy it, especially if it doesn't fit your purpose. Buy what you can afford and go outside. If you enjoyed this video, let me know. I have a lot of different unrelated ideas for videos on this channel. And thank you for watching.